I've done over $60 million in sales in the last 3 years alone. And the only reason I've been able to do that is because I've stacked the required skills needed to put me in a position to be there. And over the next 1 to 2 years, I'm looking to get to $100 million a year in sales. And to do that, I'm going to have to stack new skills on top of my existing skill sets for me to have a chance at actually doing that. So in today's video, I want to show you guys how you can gain skills so fast that it literally feels illegal. This has been the process I've used to get me to the point I'm at today, and the process I'm continuing to use to allow me to grow my skill set in the future, to put me in a position to be someone that has a business that's doing $100 million a year. And by the way, the things I'm going to go over in this video, it doesn't just apply for business skills. This applies for any skill, whether it's figuring out how to be consistent to going to the gym, or whether it's about figuring out how to change your eating habits and your diet. It doesn't really matter what domain it's for. The process I'm going to show you guys today is the same skill stacking process I would use to really learn any type of new skill, no matter what it's for. So there's 5 steps in this process. And before I go into what those steps actually are, I think what's important to note is that you have to actually decide what you're trying to stack skills for. Maybe you're in your early stages, and I'm gonna use this from business context, but again, this can be literally for anything. But let's say your goal right now is you wanna get to your first 10K a month. Or let's say it's you wanna get to your first 100K a month. Or let's say it's you wanna get to your first $1 million a month, or multi-millions a month, right? Doesn't even have to be monthly, it could be yearly, right? But the first thing is you have to set what are you actually trying to do? And then to do that, what are the skills that you're going to need to actually be able to get there? Now, you can reverse engineer this in a lot of different ways. You can use ChatGPT these days, you can use YouTube, but getting into how you're going to stack the skills, I think it's first off required to understand what are you stacking skills for, and then what are the general skills that you need to actually stack to be able to get to that goal. So setting that is relatively straightforward. I think it takes some time to actually think about that for yourself, spend some time brainstorming, but once you know that, then the next steps are going into the 5-step process to actually be able to stack a necessary skill. To narrow down on the first skill that you need to do, and let's say it's in e-commerce and you want to learn how to make good websites because that's the foundation of what you need. So let's zoom in and let's say that's a skill that we're stacking first and foremost. The first thing you need to do is learn. So when I talk about learning, what I'm talking about is actually understanding the tactical breakdown of what is needed to be able to do it, and also the strategic breakdown of what's needed. So for example, if I wanted to learn how to make websites for e-commerce sites, what I would do is I'd probably go to YouTube and start watching some tutorials on it. I probably would listen to a few podcasts. I probably would do my own research with ChatGPT to understand it. So there's so many different ways to learn, but the first thing is you need to learn what to do. And that you can usually find for free, but that's going to be step 1. So in this case, it's learning the general basics of building a website and what's needed there. Second thing you need to do is you need to study. So when I talk about studying, I'm talking about looking at real world examples of people that are doing what you're trying to do successfully. So again, using e-commerce websites as the example here, what I would then look at is successful websites in the domain that I'm trying to launch a product in. Right? So if it is a clothing brand, I would try to look at successful clothing brands that I can then define as brands that are actually doing well. So the thing is, you don't want to study from anyone. You want to study from people that are doing it successfully. That's the key thing. So with the e-commerce website, there's a lot of ways that I can track down if a person is successful. I can use a tool like SimilarWeb, which will show me how much monthly traffic a website is getting. I can look at their Facebook ads library to see how many active ads that they currently have. So those are a few ways, but I can try to use different methods to validate if someone's actually successful as a prerequisite. And if they are successful, then I can start to break down the stuff that I just learned. How does that apply into this website? So if they said you should have the above the fold section, meaning the part that shows when you just click on a website before you have to scroll at all, seeing how that is optimized from like the videos that I learned about, I would want to see how is that applied when I study it on a real website that's actually doing well. This is just websites as an example, but again, hopefully you guys can see how this can cross over to a lot of different areas. So I would study how does that actually look in real life. Once I learned what I need to do for the skill and I studied how that skill is actually applied in the real world, the next thing is actually going and practicing. So based on all of those things, it's me actually doing the things needed to put a website together in this example, right? Or if it's not website, it doesn't really matter, but it's actually doing the thing needed based on what I've learned and what I've studied. and not only doing it, but actually getting validation from it. So if I'm doing a website, it's not enough to just practice making a website. I would have to practice it and get traffic to come to the website in some way. So maybe it's through ads, maybe it's through influencer shout outs, maybe it's through organic methods like TikTok, right? There's a lot of different ways to get the traffic, but I actually need to get a source so that I can actually get data on what I'm practicing and know if it's good or bad. There has to be a way for me to be able to validate that. There's a lot of different examples we can use this for, but in the case of making a website, it would be getting traffic to the website to see, does it actually convert, if that's my target, which probably would be. So once we put it in the wild and we start to practice, then the next thing is to see what happens with all that. So we have to analyze. Once it's there, we have to see, does this page convert? So if it doesn't convert, then we have to understand, why does it not convert? So usually there will be other data points, which we can figure out when we do our learning stage of what to even look at in all of this, to see what works, what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, maybe it's because we're not getting enough people to add to cart, for example. So if we're not getting enough people to add to cart in this example, then it's probably something to do with our actual page itself. Now, let's say a lot of people are adding to cart, but there's a problem within the checkout path. Maybe we have a bug in the checkout process. Maybe it's not something to do with the page itself, right? I'm keeping this very simple for the example, but just so you guys can understand, we have to actually analyze what we just practiced to see what is wrong. You finish analyzing, then the last process is just to repeat all this over and over again. This is where it becomes essentially a flywheel effect. So once we analyze that data, our job is now to learn from that data. And if we feel like we know what to do just from the data itself, we can just keep moving down the process again. So we can either study again what we think is a good idea from another example, or we can then just move into practicing again, analyzing that data once we get the practice results there, and then repeat again. So we can essentially just keep on looping in this process where the learning can happen where, let's say we don't know what to do next, then maybe we have to go back to YouTube videos or ChatGPT or different places. Maybe it's getting a mentor or a consultant. Doesn't really matter, but the point is you're gonna have to learn again. And then once you learn, you can either study again how what you just learned is applicable in the real world. That's usually the best step. And then you move back again into the practicing, and then the analyzing, and then the repeating. So all of this just keeps on happening. And if you keep on doing this intentionally, where you're learning each time and you're taking those learnings and actually studying how those learnings are applied somewhere in the real world where it's being done successfully, and then using all of that information to practice again. And then with the practicing, you're always looking at it from a data-oriented perspective where you're analyzing, and then from the analyzation, you're finding out exactly what the next bottleneck is and repeating. You're going to be able to gain skills extremely fast if you really do it in that manner. Again, this is only an example for websites, right? You can look at the same type of process if I wanted to go to the gym, and let's say I wanted to get really big arms. What would I do? I would have to learn what are the workout routines that I can do to get really big arms. I would probably want to go to the gym and see people that have really big arms that I admire and I want to have, and probably ask them, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And trying to validate which parts of it are they doing, which parts are they not doing. Then I want to actually start practicing that routine that they just told me to do. So I start doing that workout. I start doing the curls. Maybe I'm seeing that I'm not feeling it in the place that he's telling me to feel it. So I'm analyzing, where am I not getting it from what I just learned and what I just studied by asking this guy. And then from there, what I'm doing is I'm going to repeat the process. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm not feeling it based on the data points. I'm going to try to learn again. Maybe I watch some more videos or ask ChatGPT or whatnot. I might go back and then say, hey, what do you think about this adjustment? He'll tell me, and then I keep on doing it again and again, following that same loop until eventually my arms just become massive, right? Now, the thing in the sense of business skill stacking is that we went into one thing, which is building a website. But the next thing I might have to do is make the proper ads. And then I might have to figure out how to do the media buying. And then I might have to figure out the back end and the logistics. So there's a lot of these skills that you actually have to stack together. But the point is, you should do one at a time, where you actually get that piece going in order of priority, and then keep going and stacking those skills until you get to a place where you're at, where you want that goal to be. And once you get to that goal, then you're going to understand that there's always going to be new skills that you need. And even to find the new skills that you need, you can use that same exact process I just laid out again, where you can learn, probably get a consultant that's ahead of you that already has that experience where you can learn from them. You can then also study those people to understand how are they applying it in their actual business. So the things that they're telling you, how does that look in actual practice? Based on that, you can then take that and put it into your overall game plan. So when you're practicing it based on, okay, here's the strategy I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do this skill first, that skill next, whatever it may be. Then as you're doing things, you can analyze, are you getting closer to the results or further from the results? If you're not, you can keep on repeating this process, maybe with a different consultant or whatnot. So this is pretty much an ever-going flywheel effect that will show up in the overall strategic standpoint, which I said in the beginning, of setting the targets of what you want to do. That's the only thing you have to do yourself. Once you do it, you can even get this same process for how you figure out strategically what skills you need to stack. But once you start understanding what skills it is, to go into each skill, it's just taking this process and making sure that you actually do it with all of those steps in between. And sometimes you might not have to study as much on people that are doing it because you might have a good enough understanding. So you can skip some of those, but this is the general framework that I always look at it when I know I need to go find a skill. This is the process I know that I'm going to have to do. And then I go into it and I start to stack it. Like for me now, the skills that I need to gain are much different than the skills that I had. Like now it's really just consistently bringing in really good talent, figuring out how I retain that talent, figuring out how to launch multiple products using the same process without having distractions on that. So for me, I know the skills that I need to start gaining now are different than the skills that I've had to get me to the point that I'm at right now. So overall, this is the process I look at to gain skills extremely fast. Hopefully you guys took something useful. If you guys like this type of content, I would really appreciate if you guys could subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna be posting a lot more videos like this, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and comment what you guys want to see next.